Hey guys, it's Chris. We're going to get started here. I know we put out earlier this week the fact that we're going to speak about some ejection stuff. Alex will touch on a bunch of those things, but a few things I want to lead off with, a couple things that have come up this week or some observations. So first off, guys, thanks again for all of your flexibility with the scheduling and all the weather issues we've gone through. Knock on wood, this weekend should be a lot better. But one thing we do have to ask of you, please make sure you check your schedules against the team confirmation emails you receive and the team websites, because those aren't always going to be accurate. We just want to make sure that the times and all the information we have in the Arbiter is consistent with that. If you see any discrepancies, anything that doesn't add up or isn't the same, let us know immediately so we can look into that. And with all the changes that have been made over the last couple of weeks, we're asking that you guys double, triple check. So if you have times, you've talked to a coach, just make sure that everything is consistent throughout. There's changes we're making, changes the teams, administrators are making, and oftentimes things aren't updated as quickly as any of us would like. So I know Alex and I, we're doing our best to make sure we get that stuff updated immediately, but sometimes the schools and or the conferences don't have that information up as quickly as we would like. So just make sure we're double, triple checking, and if you see something that's off, then please let us know. Because certainly the last thing any of us want is for any of you guys to go to a field or a game where there's nobody there, or a game that's been postponed, canceled, showing up late, or showing up way early for a game that's been switched. So also on top of that, guys, just make sure you're talking to your partners, confirming that way as well. So I think with all those checks and balances, you guys have been doing a great job up to this point. There should be no issues there. Some mechanics that I want to talk about. This is something that's come up, this week in particular, but I know it's happened to a lot of us, myself included, when I was working on the field a lot. Third base umpire going outside for plays at third. For anyone who's ever been in a situation as a first base umpire where there's a play on R1 going back into second, and you've seen your third base umpire try to get outside, and now you've had to try to recover and make that call at second, it's pretty impossible and certainly not very believable either. So, guys, let's think about this. We don't ever want you three to be taking a play on R1 going outside to third base. And the only situation or time we're going to allow that is batter runner going to third. There's just too many holes if we're trying to get outside and ahead of that play when R1 does not commit to third base. Say he takes a hard turn, he goes back, and now you have a close play, a whacker at second. If you really, really are trying to get outside, you almost have to overcommit to third base just to get outside in time to be able to react to the play at third and make adjustments. So let's just go in the mindset that R1, we're never going to go outside on plays at third base. We're going to take that play in the cutout like we've been doing for so many years in the two-man. It's the safe and the proper way to view this play and to call it. All right? Certainly I don't want to be in a position moving forward where if this continues, I don't want to have to say to you guys, we're not going outside at all, because there are some advantages to doing that in certain plays on batter runners. But let's just make sure we don't do it anymore, okay? Another thing that's come up this week is umpires in the middle of the diamond taking care of and handling benches, whether it's bench jockeying or comments, whatever it may be. So let's make sure that if we have a wing umpire, that he is taking care of his bench. Let him handle it. If the crew chief on the field feels like that umpire, that wing guy, maybe isn't taking care of it, or maybe he's missing something, then that's something we can talk about in between innings. But what we want to try to avoid is a guy in the middle yelling completely across the diamond at a bench. And really, when you think about it, guys, there's really no way for them to hear you from the middle unless you're yelling clear across the diamond. So let the the wing umpire take care of his benches. If the umpire is in the middle and his side of the field is, yelling stuff out at the team, out of the field, if there's a situation that has to be handled, let's have our plate guy try to do his best to help him out with that, knowing he's in the middle. And quite honestly, guys, if you're in the middle and you have to deal with the situation, let's just move towards the bench, call time, handle it any way you have to, whether it's just a warning or just a comment to the coach to handle it and shut it down quickly. But let's do it in a very calm, non-combative fashion. Let's not yell and scream, because at the end of the day, whenever we're doing that, it makes us look bad. It makes us look like the aggressor. So one other thing when it comes to that, guys, let's make sure that if we do have a warning for bench jockeying, that the plate umpire gets all that information written down in his lineup card. Okay, so if it does progress to a potential ejection, we have all that information at hand so we can properly record that in our suspension report. Another thing that's come up over the last week or so is just some coaches questioning and talking about the hit by pitch. Now, we all know that rule is for years now been one of the most difficult plays for us to umpire on the field, and certainly is discussed with coaches probably as much as any other call out there. So one thing that I've heard from coaches this week, and I've spoke to a bunch of them, is that even on the same crew and the same field, the explanation to these coaches about the rule is not consistent. So here's some key things that I want you guys to think about and remember. And really, not only in judging whether or not you send them to first base or keep them at home plate, or just basically how you're going to judge this play, okay? Here's the things that you want to really think about. Did that batter or did he not make a legitimate attempt to avoid being hit by that pitch? Okay? Did he try to get hit by the pitch or did he not? Was it possible for him to avoid being hit by that pitch? And one thing a lot of us have used for a while, did he hit the pitch or did the pitch hit him? So I think when we think about and ask ourselves those questions when trying to judge whether or not we send them to first base or keep them at the plate, if we go through the process and think about those in those terms, it's going to make it easier for us not only to judge that, but also to explain it to the coach. And if our explanation across the board is going to be one of those possible scenarios, and we phrase it and explain it that way to the coaches, I think there'll be more consistency. And let's face it, they're not always going to agree with the call. But at least now we have a better way of answering them, and I think it's going to go a lot smoother. Another thing that came up just yesterday in speaking with a coach, he had a question about, and this is in reference, guys, to the video we saw. I believe it was on the online rules test this year. The video was showing a batter rolling into a pitch. So let's just make sure that when we judge a hit by pitch, once again, keeping him at the plate or sending him to first, when a batter rolls, I think you really have to ask the same question. With his rolling of his body, was it legal or illegal? Was he trying to get by the pitch or not? So if a batter is just merely rolling to try to avoid being hit or to not intentionally get hit by the pitch, I think we have to give him first base. If you think that there's any sort of a secondary movement with that batter rolling, throwing the knee out, the lower body, the elbow, the shoulder, well, that's something entirely different. And I think now that's where he is trying to get by the pitch. So just the mere fact you have a batter rolling into a pitch or rolling back away from it doesn't necessarily mean that we keep him at the plate. So let's just think about that on those close pitches. Like I said earlier, guys, I've been speaking with coaches in all 4 Division I conferences this week. I've extended phone calls to all of them, and over the last day or so, a bunch of Division III coaches as well. And a lot of them seem to continually bring up the word feel, having a feel for the game. And, it's something that I don't know that we all think about all the time. Some umpires see things a bit differently out there. Some things come easier. Sometimes you've heard about the game being slower for some guys. So what does it mean to have a feel? I think it's just having an awareness of what is happening on the field at all times. What's happening in the dugouts, the players on the field, the crowd, the coaches, just knowing what the situations are. knowing the score, the inning, the tone of the game, the emotions, what has happened, home runs, bench jockeying, all of those things rolled into one. And I think now, having that feel for a game, we're better equipped to handle situations based on all those variables, okay? Identifying what a coach is saying to you, and how is he saying it? Is he merely asking a question? Is he upset? Is it emotional? Those are things that I think we all have to take into account here in how we deal and handle these situations. And when you're in an argument, guys, is it a legitimate argument? Is it based on a situation that just happened in the game? Is he emotional, or is he making it personal? And I think once you guys can identify all of those and you ask yourselves those questions in that discussion, I think it's going to be much easier for you guys to handle that situation, because now you've identified why he's out there, why a player is acting the way he is. And if it's just an emotional thing but not personal, then maybe we allow them just to vent. We allow them just to work it out on their own. And I think we've talked about this before. If somebody respectfully asks you a question, I think we owe it to them to answer it. We owe it to them. Do you have to calm him down before you explain your side? Once again, do you let him vent? Okay, do you let him get that emotion out? You just let him talk for a couple seconds. I think we need to listen before you talk and confirm what he's asking. I know I've done this before. Sometimes we answer questions or assume they're discussing and arguing a play that we're completely wrong on. We think it's one thing, and they're actually asking a question about something else. So let's make sure we identify exactly why they're out there and what they're asking you. And identify when the discussion is starting to go a little bit long, when it's repeating itself. At what point do you realize that neither side, yourself nor the coach or player, is going anywhere? And then at that point, then I think we get to a situation where we just have to agree to disagree and try to move on and identify that and try to communicate in a good way to the coach or player that we've reached that point where we're just going nowhere, and now we have to move on and get the game going again. And guys, there's going to come a point where you say to them, hey, it's time, we got to move on. We got to get the game going, but walking away in a respectful way, not in a way that's going to make the coach feel like you're not listening to him. Okay, showing him that respect, but acknowledging the fact that we're just spinning out of control here. Not emotional, warning if necessary. Okay, I think sometimes when we issue warnings, we get a little emotional, we get a little amped up, and we let the emotion get the best of us. So making sure if we're going to issue that warning, we just do it matter of fact. Here it is. Here's your warning. And then we'll decide where we're going to go from there. And let's get the game started again, okay? So just some things to think about. These are some things that I've heard from coaches this week that I think is very useful for us on the field. And I think if we ask ourselves these questions as these situations are unfolding, I think it'll make it much easier for us to deal with it. Okay, so Alex sent the email out earlier in the week, and we're going to talk about some of the ejection situations. So I'll let Alex now jump on here and do a little presentation, a little talk to you guys about ejections.
Hey guys, how are you tonight? We have a little presentation about ejections. Before I start, I just want to let you know, for anybody who is listening and might have kids around with the ejection piece of this and reading ejection reports, there's going to be some profanity here, not for the purposes of just swearing for no reason, but because it illustrates a point as it results to writing ejection reports. So just kind of fair warning to everyone on that. If you do have a phone that's, nearby small children or anyone that you wouldn't want to hear that type of language. So didn't want to just throw out all kinds of swears without you guys knowing. I'm going to go through a couple of points and then kind of a special guest tonight. Scott Taylor is with us, the Division II National Coordinator. And when you guys write an ejection report, although we don't write Division II ejection reports, a lot of us right now, those reports go to him. And as part of the exercise tonight, we are going to hear a few ejection reports, the meat of the ejection reports, the action that led to the ejection, and we're going to have some feedback from both Chris and from Scott on how, as a conference coordinator and a national coordinator, they react to the particular ejection report. So I just want to say, first of all, that, ejections are probably one of, if not the most serious thing that we deal with on the field. And our ejections and our ejection reports are coming under more and more scrutiny every year. A lot of that because of the video and audio capabilities that the teams and stadiums have now. When we have an ejection and we have to write a report, we need to be talking with our partners. We need to have the appropriate names and numbers of anyone that does get ejected. We need to proofread our work. In 3-man, 4-man crews, our crew chiefs need to be involved with all of the report writing as it relates to an ejection. If it's the 2-man on a crew or the 3-man, the crew chief should certainly be involved. And if the crew chief's writing it, he's going to want to get feedback. If it's a 2-man crew, obviously you guys are working together. These reports are going to ADs. They're going to conference coordinators. Coaches are going to see them. Let's not embarrass ourselves. Let's not embarrass our peers by putting in a report on a good ejection that makes us look bad. If you need help, ask. I know Chris and I had a situation yesterday with an ejection where an umpire asked us, hey, can you help me write this? I had a throwing situation. I'm not 100% sure how to go about doing this. Once it's gone, once you click that submit button, it's off to the NCAA. When you are involved in a situation out there, you want to be thinking about how the report's going to write as it's going on. Be writing the report in your mind as the situation unfolds. Our job is to paint a picture and write a story in an ejection report so that an administrator or a commissioner who doesn't necessarily understand all of the intricacies of baseball can get a look at what happened out on the field and why discipline has been imparted on someone on their team. So that being said, Scott, are you with us?
I am here, yes.
Before we start, is there anything you kind of wanted to say on this topic off the cuff, or are you ready to roll?
Well, I was kind of hoping you'd read ejection reports first. That way somebody else would curse before I did. The only thing I can say is I've got 184 ejection reports in this year. I'm about 30 ahead of last year. And quite frankly, I have seen some of the worst writing I have ever seen in my life. We don't explain ourselves well when it comes to writing. And I encourage people to, like you just said, get some help writing your ejection report if you're having a hard time with that. And the other thing that I want to talk about a little bit, I was going to kind of close a little bit on the end, was, I don't know where we got to the point, and I am speaking for George and Don because you all do work for George and Don on a frequent basis. But you know what, guys? We're writing ejection reports and getting them back 24, 25, 27 hours after the fact. I don't know how or where we got to that. Our ejection report should be filed within 8 hours. And if there's a suspension attached to it, 4 hours. I get it. You guys want to go and have some fun after a baseball game and go have a couple of pops after the game and socialize with the crew, and that's what it's all about. But if you have an ejection, handle your business first and then go have your fun. Because I have to read and they have to read every single one of these. So make it easier on everybody else by submitting them on time, because it's too hard to notify coaches and players of suspendable items when you're getting it to us 2 hours before a game starts. I don't know if you guys are having that problem as much because, as Alex said, I don't get to see those reports from you guys, but I know it is a big problem nationwide, and I don't think it's just at the Division II level. So do your business, handle your business on the field, handle your business off the field when it's done, and get your ejection / suspension reports in a timely manner so that they can be dealt with.
Thanks, Scott. So, guys, I'm going to bookend this with some different level of competency in terms of how they were written. So we may start off good or start off bad, but we'll hear Scott's feedback and Chris's feedback. So our first report here is number 10, Ben Smith, grounded out and was called out on a close play to end the top of the fourth inning. He slammed his helmet into the turf and fence. I ignored this action and turned to go to short right field in between innings. As I looked back towards Smith, he said, "Don't say shit to me, bro." I said, "This is your official warning," and before I could finish the verbiage, he said, "I told you, don't say shit to me, bro." I ejected him from the game.
My turn?
Yes.
Go ahead. Don't say shit to me, bro, is you're done, pal. There is no warning for that. One of my biggest pet peeves, and please don't abuse what I'm saying here, because we should get a warning in whenever we can, but there are just some things that get done that you don't warn for, and that's one of them. When he slammed his helmet into the fence and on the turf, quite frankly, he might have gone for me right there. That is an outward show of unsportsmanlike conduct. We're not in professional baseball, and I'm not going to coddle these guys. I believe if you give a warning in that situation, it's okay. Don't say shit to me, bro. You give a warning after that. That for me is a sign of a weak umpire. Period. You got to take care of your business when you got to take care of your business, and that's not a warrantable offense for me, Alex.
Yeah, I would. I'm there, Chris. Where are you at on that?
Yeah, and guys, we've talked an awful lot about ejections here and all these calls, and it seems to come up every single time, which is a good thing. But one thing that I have said to you guys is I don't want any of you guys out there to be abused or feel like you're taken advantage of or to take any garbage from guys. So you get the warnings in when you can, but we all should know. Scott knows, George knows, Don knows, and the schools will know as well. There are going to be instances where not getting a warning in is perfectly fine, and then you just, in that section on your ejection report where it asks if you got the warning in, then you just say time did not allow or the actions on the field did not allow me to get a warning in. That's all you have to say. And as long as you're accurate in how you explain the ejection, like in this instance, nobody's going to question that at any level.
And Chris, I want to tag team in on that for a second, because I think that there's a perception that the NCAA doesn't have your guys' back on a baseball field, that if you don't get that warning in, that we're going to call you up and chastise you for it. I'm more likely to call somebody and chastise them if they give a warning when they shouldn't have, quite frankly. We got to quit umpiring scared, and I think that a lot of guys are doing that right now. I'm not saying go out there and puff your chest out and dump everybody in sight, but I am saying when situations arise that we should be taking care of things immediately, think about the fact that you're making it harder on the guy who has to follow you the next time that team plays. And that's where you really got to come down on these guys and don't allow stuff to happen on your baseball field that you know darn good well somebody else isn't going to allow.
All right. I will point out that from that perspective on that ejection, I thought it was written fairly well. Whatever transpired and whether we agree or disagree with that gave us a clear picture of where everyone was on the field, what happened, what kind of warnings were issued or not issued, and then what happened to cause the ejection. So we'll see some situations moving forward where that is not as clear. So I thought, regardless of how we felt about the actual action, that the report was written in a manner that was clear and concise. Would you agree with that, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, it sounded to me like everything was handled properly. I've got guys that have turned in ejections and just given me player numbers, which then I'll just turn around and kick it right back to you. Say, do your homework, go to the website and find out who the heck it was. Yeah, it's happened on multiple occasions this year.
Yeah. Okay, next one. And I think this particular one, just to give everyone a heads up, will be in the realm of probably a good ejection, or has very many elements of a good ejection, but the write-up doesn't do the umpire justice for what he did. So here goes. In the top of the third inning, I called a balk on the Saratoga Phillies. The balk scored the second run for that team. The coach from Saratoga started questioning my decision. As he started with his behavior, very loud tone, his team started getting chatty. I gave him explanation for the balk, and he continued to mouth off. I then gave me the entire bunch a warning. The coach, Steve Jones, stated that I was doing too much, let the kids play. I didn't respond. As I turned my back to return to my position behind the catcher, he or someone next to him yelled, "Will you stop squeezing the pitcher?" At that time, I ejected the coach.
Wow. Where do I start? Anytime you can say fewer words to get your point across, quit trying to be flowery in an ejection report. It's black and white. It's not gray. The other thing for me is in that situation, okay, they've talked, and you were a little frustrated maybe that you had to take a little bit of guff, but then he wants to whine about balls and strikes. Balls and strikes have to be a warnable offense for me. It's probably a good ejection, Alex, but the one time I do want warnings given is on balls and strikes. If they don't give a warning on a ball and strike, it's hard to back that. The other things is where you can get away with not giving a warning.
Yeah, and guys, I dealt with this ejection directly and spoke to the umpire, spoke to the other umpire, spoke to the AD, spoke to actually a dean of students who was there. And so that probably influences me to tell you guys that all of the elements of a good ejection were here, but the umpire maybe didn't get a specific warning in where he should have, and also then didn't do himself really any favors by writing it up in a manner that when a conference commissioner takes a look at it is going to say, wow, I'm not really sure what happened here. So just keep in mind, you can make a good ejection and a good handling of situations look really poor just by the way you write something up. So take the time. I know we all have busy lives, but, don't write it on your iPhone. Don't write it on your iPad unless you have some sort of method to proofread, method to make sure that, you're communicating with your crew to make sure you're good with the report and submitting something that is certainly very usable moving forward for a conference commissioner or AD to take action.
Yeah, for me, that didn't really paint a very good picture, and quite honestly, that's a report there that's probably going to bring along a couple of phone calls to get more information to clear that up. I think you want the report to be clear, concise, right to the point, and really there should be no question about what happened out there.
Yeah, and I think leading right into the next one, we have a very brief report, a third one here that I'm not actually 100% sure what happened. So here goes. In the top of the fifth inning, Jim Smith verbally displayed his displeasure with me over being called out on strikes. I warned him to keep his mouth shut and continue to go back to his dugout, but he continued to verbally chastise me about the call, so I ejected him.
Again, too flowery. Chastised is not a word that needs to be in an ejection report. Be clear and concise with what you're trying to write here. You can't tell him to keep his mouth shut either, unfortunately. That's one of those do as I say, don't do as I did kind of things. You got to go to the official verbiage here. Unfortunately, you have a tool in the belt that you got to use. You can't argue balls and strikes if you continue on. I'm going to have to eject you. You can't say knock it off anymore. You can't say, keep your mouth shut, shut up over in the hole. Those things are out. You can't do that anymore. So, again, be concise, and say the right things and just stay to the point.
Hey, guys, we've talked about this a number of times as well. I mean, we have the script. We have all of the process to follow, and we need to do that. As much as we'd like to use some of those old school ways of handling, just listen to how that sounds in the report and how it's going to be read and what an administrator of school is going to say. Does that sound like the umpire was trying to diffuse the situation? Did he escalate it by his actions and his words? Or did he simply say, hey, that's your warning. If you continue, you'll be ejected? There's no defense to that. If that player now decides to go and step across the line and continue to say something, you're in the right here, not him. You cannot be construed as escalating or making it worse if you just follow the script.
I think the other thing for me here is, as someone reading this, I want to know exactly what was said that caused the ejection. I don't want to know that he displayed displeasure or he chastised me. I want to know what the exact words are. And I also want to assure you guys that there's nothing wrong with putting those exact words if you're quoting someone. So, again, I don't need to swear unnecessarily on the phone here, but, if it's swearing, if it's personal, whatever it may be, as many exact quotations that you can give in terms of what was said, I think make a report stronger. When someone uses language like this, verbally displayed his displeasure, I feel like the umpire in some way either doesn't remember what was said, or maybe it wasn't a great ejection, so he doesn't exactly have the verbiage. If you can say exactly what he said, or that's going to make the report much stronger. So I wanted to talk a second before we get to the last couple here, just about players and coaches getting personal versus talking about, say, a call. And I think over the course of the last 2 weeks or so, we've had some situations that have involved vulgarity that are not necessarily personal, that have resulted in ejections. So I guess my thought process on this for you guys is, if you're not ejecting someone automatically without the vulgarity, then you shouldn't be automatically ejecting him with it. So, for instance, I don't think we're ejecting someone immediately for saying something like, that's a terrible call. So if they just insert the word fuck in there and say, that's a fucking terrible call, again, I don't think that's an immediate ejectable offense. Do I think it needs to be addressed? Probably leads to a warning pretty quickly, especially if they're escalated with their voice and their tone, yes. But to immediately eject for that just because of that word being in there, I think is a poor ejection. Same thing with things like, are you kidding me versus are you fucking kidding me? Again, things that players may say, coaches may say, they're venting, they're not saying anything personal about you. On the other hand, we may have phrases that are said like, you suck, or you're horrible, or you're terrible. And look, there's no vulgarity in there at all, but those are you followed by something not nice that is personal that need to result in automatic ejection. So the example here that I'm going to give you guys, I'll let you in your minds decide which one this is, and then we'll hear Scott and Chris talk about it. So top of the eighth, bases loaded, base hit to left field. The runner on second attempted to score. He was called out on a tag play at home plate. The on-deck hitter came in to direct the slide. After the play, he yelled profanity directly at me. He said, "Are you fucking kidding me?" The player took a step or two towards me and was a few feet from me when he said that. I immediately ejected him from the game.
You and I might have a little bit of different thought process on this one.
Yep.
Coaches I'll give a little bit of rope to. Players I won't. I don't get to curse a player, so therefore a player doesn't get to curse me. So the sportsmanship code for players, for me, is different than it is for a head coach. I'm going to let a head coach do some of the things that you talked about prior to reading that. And I might stop him in the middle of about the second time he drops an F-bomb on me and say, look, I understand that this is probably part of your language, but I can't curse you, so I would appreciate it if you wouldn't curse me and go from there. But a player who drops an F-bomb on you, no excuse. You're done, period, for me, for any player that does it. Alex, that's kind of how I'm up. That's my take on it.
Chris?
I would agree with that. I think in this situation with that player advancing towards the umpire using that language, I mean, obviously at worst you're going to give them a warning for that. But if that comes across my desk and this is how one of their student athletes is speaking to one of the umpires, I can defend that if he ejects them. Absolutely, I can defend that because I'm quite sure that's not how they want their players to act on the field. So I'm good with an ejection on that. Obviously, at worst, a very quick warning and a pretty aggressive approach in ejecting them if they say anything or do anything. And hopefully somebody gets them the hell out of there as well.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to earlier in the call where Chris was talking about having a little bit of feel in terms of how the situation develops, what the situation is, what's warranted as an umpire based on all of that, and then how the words are used. And I think one of the points that Chris and I have been going back and forth with some different ejection reports, not necessarily this one, was just really, again, vulgarity influencing whether someone was ejected. And this one, I think, is on the borderline of the player, the student-athlete, cursing the umpire. There have been other instances, I think, that we've had where there's just been cursing in general, and we've had a pretty quick trigger without a warning just basically for cursing. So I did want to kind of bring that back home and just say use that feel to figure out what the cursing is doing and whether it's an ejectable offense versus, something that maybe you want to warn, or in some certain cases, depending on, again, what's going on, maybe even ignore. So that's the big thing I wanted to bring out there about the profanity and how it was being used.
Alex, another thing that I'll say, Alex, about that too, real quick, is that Chris talked about this at the very front end of the call, and I really appreciate the fact that he did. Was he was talking about feel, or what I call baseball IQ. You have to understand and know the situation. It may be a questionable call, and we may not be 100% sure we got it right, but it's something we're going to live with. Do you give a little bit of rope in that situation over somebody who just comes out and is an idiot over nothing? Sure you do. You have to. And I have found in my time now, after this is my fourth year off the field, is the guys that handle their situations are actually also the same guys that have the baseball feel. Baseball field gets you to a play and gets you ahead of that play and gets you in a position to be in the best position to make that call a lot of times. But that's not the only thing baseball field is. Baseball field, you understand and know situational baseball, and you tend to handle your situations better if you have that feel. So, Marsh, I wanted to say that I appreciate you talking about feel, because that's a very big factor in what's going on with this conversation as well.
Yeah. In this situation, the way I'm listening to this report, it would seem to me, not being there, that this player and his actions, the way he approached the umpire, that would probably project very loudly and aggressively throughout the field. So if you have one of those comments that a player makes, maybe close to you, that nobody really hears, and I'm not saying you ignore it or look past it, but in this situation, I think it's pretty clear that everyone in the ballpark, or at least within the vicinity of the field there, probably saw this kid's actions and heard him. So what kind of a message does that send if you don't eject him on this? I think that just sets you up for failure either further into the game, or the next time you have them, or now that you've now created a situation where the players think that they can treat umpires or speak to them that way the next time another crew's in town. So that's something to consider also on a play like that for me.
All right, last one, and then we'll kind of call it an evening here. In the bottom of the 8th inning, with the Bulldogs leading the Hornets 9-5, none out and runners on first and second, Bulldogs batter Flickner hit a pop-up to shallow center field that was not caught. The runner from second base, Zelger, was thrown out at third attempting to advance. Bulldogs head coach Joe Wright came out to argue the play and also to ask why an infield fly was not called. I explained the ball could not be caught with ordinary effort, and the brief argument ended. As I was returning to my position on the field, I heard Bulldogs assistant coach Chris Miller yell from the top step of the dugout, "You suck." He was immediately ejected from the game.
Boy, if you can't paint the picture from that, you can't paint the picture. I don't know who wrote that one, but he gets a gold star.
Yeah, that's a Picasso right there.
So, closing thoughts, guys? Anything? Scott,
well,
Chris?
I'll say one thing. I'm in a restaurant, so I'm moving outside because it's time for me to say what I want to say about this. I'm going to tell you guys this. If you set the tone early in the game that you're not going to take grief, you won't take grief. But you can't be about doing it. If that makes sense to you. Don't be a don't take grief that you don't have to take. I think we run the gamut, the spectrum here of emotions as an umpire, and I think we some guys go over the top being a some guys go over the top being. We need to find a middle ground. We are the ones in control. We are the upholders and keepers of the game. You can't let people get away. We are the law. But at the same time, you don't get to be the law and do it like ruling with fear. I hate ruling with fear. I want guys to understand that you're in charge, and I want guys to understand that if there is a line you cross, I have a line. I'm willing to talk to you, but I do have a line, and when you cross a line, then consequences are to be following. So I think if you set that tone and you set that line for yourself and make it as consistent as possible across your entire organization, I think everybody knows and goes out with the expectation that, okay, on our baseball fields in these conferences, this is where we can go and this is where we can't go. And I think once we learn that fine line, I think everybody gets along better, and I think it makes it easier for everybody else. So I'm going to go eat. Guys, thanks for letting me be on your call. Great job. I love this call. I love this group. You guys know how I feel about this group. So I appreciate Alex, you guys, and you and Marsh asking me to be on it tonight. So have a good night.
Thanks, Scott. Chris, any closing thoughts here?
Yeah, two things. One with that, and then I'll close with something else. But think about what Scott just said. I think the best umpire out there, guys, is the one who is approachable, who works hard, who's fair. But when it's time for you to step up and take care of business, you have to do so. And I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this before. When it comes to warnings, if you warn somebody, then you have to follow through with whatever happens after the warning. But that being said, in a respectful, non-combative way. And I think once you do that and you follow that script and you are approachable and no nonsense when you have to be, but once you're no nonsense, you go right back to work and you're the same kind of even keel professional umpire after a situation, that's where you're going to gain respect from coaches and players out there. So think about those things. Alex, anything else before I close?
Chris, no, I think we're
Warren, Bump is here.
Oh, Bump, sorry, Bump.
No problem. The biggest things I take out of all of our conversation here is when we write up things, be specific. When we talk them in generalities, it's no good. Be specific about what happened and stay, and Chris just talked about it as well, stay calm and rational on the field. It's really all I got.
One thing I was very happy about, and Scott touched on it, and this isn't to compare ourselves with anybody across the country. And Alex, if I'm missing one here, let me know. But I think you guys have done a great job when you've had an ejection of getting that report in on time. And I want to applaud you guys for that. You guys are taking the time to do it, and that makes my job, Bump's job, and Alex's job much easier because we have this thing quickly enough where now we can deal with the situation. We're not waiting. The worst situation that could possibly happen is that we don't have a report yet, and now we have a coach or a team, a conference calling us, and we don't have the information yet. Also, I know anytime anyone has called me, I've actually asked you just to shoot me a quick text or email with the information either in advance of the ejection report or at the same time, so I don't have to go through the whole report. I have that email, and I have at least for me, it works easier to have that information right in front of me, so when I do have to speak with somebody, it's all there for me. So great job, guys, when it comes to making sure you get those reports in on time. Alex, you agree with that?
I do. I've run into a couple instances with guys not having the appropriate phone numbers, whether it be mine or Marsh's or Bump's, whoever it may be. Just make sure our numbers are programmed in your phone and do all that kind of stipulation that when you have an ejection, call it in. The first question I'll typically ask if it's a D3 ejection is, was it a routine ejection? And if it is, I'm going to say, okay, write the report, send it in, get it to me. I don't, unless you guys tell me there's something out of the ordinary that I need to know about right away, I'm probably not going to, get into it in terms of everything that happened. If it's a simple ejection, I'm going to allow you guys to write it up. And but again, when I ask that question, I need an honest answer, because if there's something that I'm going to need to know about when I'm getting that in an hour, I need to know about it. So just be honest with whomever asks you that question, or however each of the coordinators at the different levels, wants it handled.
And guys, for me, if you guys do have issues or problems with writing a report, I'll help you. Certainly, if it makes the process easier, or quite honestly, you're not familiar with the arbiter system, how to do it, I can walk you through or proofread or offer some suggestions if it makes it easier for you. All right? So I think we're all set on that. Just to close, guys, obviously we're getting closer to the end of the season. It's right around the corner. So we all know what happens towards the end of the season. Everyone's going to pick up their intensity. Players and teams are going to pick their games up. They're fighting for tournament spots. A lot of these conferences, are really close in the standings now. I look at them all the time. I did when I was on the field, and I'm sure a lot of you guys do now, going into weekends or matchups during the week. And that being said, the emotions will be running higher as well. So, what that means for me and for you guys as well, you have to pick up your intensity and focus, because these games are getting more and more important as we get to the end. And with everything we've said here, knowing that the emotions are running higher, there's more importance on these games, we have to try even more so to be the calming influence out there. We have to be the ones that keeps the ship sailing straight and keeps everybody, on an even keel here. If we start to lose it and get emotional and bark at people, then that's just going to make things worse, okay? So keep doing what you're doing. Know and take an approach how the last few weeks of the season play out. You guys have been doing this long enough. You know how to handle it. So just pick up your games and let's finish strong, okay? So, guys, great job so far, and thank you for hopping on the phone call tonight. I think this was a really important phone call for us to have, and hopefully some of this information will help you. Have a good weekend. You guys need anything, certainly reach out to me, Alex or Bump, and we'll help you in any ways that we can. So have a good night, guys, and have a good weekend. Thanks again.